Welcome to CIS195 Week 4. This week we're going to be moving on from HTML and moving on to CSS. CSS is known as Cascading Style Sheets, and it's a way to make your web pages look nicer. Yeah, if you think of your web page like a person, we can consider HTML the skeleton. It's just the basic structure of things. For CSS, it acts like the skin and the clothing and the styling to all of that. CSS is helpful in this way because it controls how the elements on the page look and how they're positioned. It can also help make certain web pages work better on different devices. So if we look here, we can see a web page. This is a simple web page that doesn't have any CSS applied to it. It's just a basic structure. Now as we go through this, I'm going to create CSS and we'll create a page that looks like this. Now it's still not perfect, but it's definitely more colorful, stands out a little bit better. And that's the goal of CSS. So at this point, let's just go ahead and I'm going to close off a lot of these pages I have open here. And let's just actually go to this original. So this is the starting point, and that's what this original page looks like. Now, I don't really want to write over the top of this, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this and I'll paste it. And I'm going to give it a new name. I'm just going to call this index. So this will be our index. And then over here, so that I can separate this, I'm going to call this our working document. So I'll just say working. And what we're going to ultimately do is adjust this from this page without the CSS into this ultimate ending page. I'll go ahead and I'm going to open that page in our browser so that we actually can watch as we create this page. So we're going to start off by creating the most simple CSS within our web page. Now, these are known as inline styles. This is actually adding style to an element within our HTML page. And I'm going to start off here with our H1 element. I'm going to add a style to here. So I'm going to do this by adding to this the attribute style. And then you have to put an equal. And then the styles have to be within quotes. And we're going to tell it what do we want that style to be. So I'm going to start off by changing the color of the text. I do this just by writing the word color. I have to place a colon. I don't necessarily have to put a space, but I'm going to do it anyways just for aesthetics. It looks a little bit better for me. And then I can actually type the color that I want. In this case, I'm going to say green. Okay, so I've completed the CSS here. If I come over to my page on my working sheet and I were to refresh this, you'll notice that the H1, the Welcome to Pet Paradise, has adjusted to green. So this is pretty quick and easy. It doesn't take a lot of effort to change this particular style. We can actually add another style into this line if we wanted to. So I can actually put a semicolon, which indicates the end of that previous style. And I can add another style here, and I'm actually going to center the text. So I'm going to use the command text align, and I'll say center. Let's look at that. So there we go. So now we've made an adjustment. We've changed the color and centered the text. So if I actually go back to the original, you'll notice we do have a slight difference here. So things are already looking a little bit better, not much, but we've actually added a little bit of depth to our page. Okay, so internal style sheets, while they are a pretty good approach, you can actually apply the style to different areas within your page, but you'd have to replace this in each area that you did this. And this actually becomes somewhat cumbersome over time. So instead, we can instead of placing this here, we can change this to a different type of style. It's known as an internal style sheet, which allows us to place all of our style in one location within the document. And that's what we're going to do right now. So to use an internal style sheet, what I have to do is I have to use an element, and it has to go within the head. And this is known as the style element. So I'll do our style element. And then within here, I have to take our CSS code. So in this case, our CSS is the color, green, with a semicolon. I'll go ahead and I'll place that there. And it's also our text align center with the semicolon. Okay. Now, I want you to look at this here. If I were to remove the styling here within the H1, like I said, I've moved it up here. Well, we have an error. Let's see, what have I done wrong? It looks like I have made a mistake in my style. I see what I've done. I haven't completed the command. Okay. So something that is missing here, which is really important, is the style needs to know what to apply, or what area within the web page to apply these to. So in this case, the style command doesn't understand. It just says, hey, you want to do a color and you want to align some text, but what text? Where do you want to apply this to? So previously, I had assigned this to the H1 tag. So what I have to do up here is actually say, to the H1 tag, I'm going to apply some styles. I have to use these curly brackets to indicate what it is I want to apply, and that has to surround that. So you have, where on the web page do I want to apply my style? I use curly braces to indicate these are the styles, and then I place the styles within that. Okay. So now if I refresh this, you shouldn't notice any difference here. I'm going to go ahead and change this so you understand that this is working. So I'm going to change this to the right instead. And you should notice this will move over to the right side of the page. Alright, that's what I wanted. Let's go ahead and place it back, because that's not where I wanted that to be sitting. Alright, so an internal style sheet is definitely a little better, because I can actually put all my styles at the top, a little easier to understand and look, instead of digging down through lines and lines of HTML code to find where our styling is. Okay, so this is definitely more organized, but it's got its own problems, and one of those is that this style will only apply to this sheet. If I have multiple pages within my website, I may want to have all those websites using the same style. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create what's called an external style sheet. Okay, an external style sheet, we have to create another document, and I'm going to create that here. So I'll do a new file, and I'm just going to call this styles.css to indicate that this is a CSS set of commands. Oh, it doesn't like that. Oh, it's because I'm creating it in the wrong location. So let's try that again. There we go. Alright, so I have my style sheet. Now what I need to do is I'm going to go back to our working document. I'm actually going to pull out, cut the CSS that we placed here. So I'll go ahead and I'll refresh this so you can see that our working document now is returned to the original. Go to my style sheet, and I'm going to paste in the CSS. Now this does not need the style tag in the document. So all we have is the CSS coding within our style sheet. Now I need to go back into our document, our HTML document, and I need to add in the appropriate information so it can actually reference the style sheet. So let's do that here. I'm going to use the tag link, the href attribute, and then I have to tell it where do I want it to find this document. It's styles.css, and then I also have to do use one more attribute here, and it's the relationship, telling it what is this particular document, and we're telling it it's a style sheet. Okay, close up that command. Now if everything's working properly, hopefully when I refresh this it applies our styles for us. Alright, so let's continue on. We're going to add some more CSS styles to our pocketbook here. So let's go back over to the style sheet. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about are comments. So in CSS, you can have comments, just like you can have them in HTML code. So I'm going to add a comment here in CSS. It's a / an asterisk. See if I can get this type, and then a comment. And then you end this with an asterisk and a /. Now this can be on a single line, or it can actually span multiple lines. So if I wanted to take this comment here, and let's just say I wanted to surround the H1, you'll notice it actually changed the color here to say, hey, this is a comment. Thus this code, CSS code that we put in here, will not work now. So if I were to refresh the page, once again, we're going to lose this. So let me go ahead and undo that and just make that a standard comment. If I do it that way, our styling should reappear. Now let's move on to a new topic. I'm going to go back to the index page here. Because what I want to do is I want to look at a particular, I want to look at the structure of our document here. So we have the body, the header, and then we have other tags underneath this. So if we go back to styles, we'll notice that our H1 tag is where we currently have a style placed. So that's under the header tag. Now I could make some changes here that affect multiple areas within our document at the same time. I actually could affect the entire body of the document by adding something. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my style sheet here. I'm going to add in a new command, or a new tag, a new command called body. do our brackets. And let's go ahead here. I'm going to change the color within the body to blue. Now, this is an interesting thing. If I do this, everything within the body of the document, now that's including my header, should turn blue. Let me go ahead and refresh this. You'll notice, not quite what we expected here. So the top portion here, the header, stayed green, or excuse me, the H1 tag stayed green while everything else tinged blue. This is due to something known as it's an overriding concept. Because H1 is more specific, it overrides what we told the body to do. Now with the body, when we told it to turn blue, all of the tags underneath it also turn blue because of what's known as inheritance. So they're inheriting the commands that are, or the styles that are placed above it. And that's what will always happen. So if I were to go back here to my style sheet, and instead of saying body, I were to choose a different area here. Let's say if I were to choose the, what do we have here? A section would do it, but that's everything. So if I were to change that to footer, because that's at the bottom, this will only apply to the footer of the page. Everything else should turn back to black, and our footer is now blue. So this is the concept of inheritance. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this back to the body here. And I'm going to add one more style here. I'm going to put in a font family. So I'm going to use a different font for my page. And we're going to use the Arial font, the sans serif sub font. Close that up with a semicolon, so they should change the look just slightly. Okay, there we go. Things are looking a little different, so let's go back to the original. It's still not perfect, but a little better. We're adding a little flavor to it. Alright, so let's move on to something new. Let's go back to our page here. I'm going to go back to our index for a moment here, and I want to show you something. So if we look on our page, we'll notice that under the header we have an H1 tag. This is the only H1 tag within this document. Now I'm going to make a change. I'm actually going to adjust one of our H1s, our H2 tags, so it's an H1. So I'm going to do that under the main area here. And if I refresh this, you'll notice that that H1 and this H1 now have the same color applied to it from our style. So we told it to color it green and center it. The reason I did this is because I want to talk about our next topic known as contextual selectors. So contextual selectors allow us to be a little more specific in how we choose what we want to apply our styling to. And this is based upon hierarchy. So basically, is something underneath something else? Another term for that would be a descendant. So if I go back to my index here, we can look at our tags. And our top H1 tag is actually hierarchically under the header. So if I only wanted this green to be applied, green and centering to be applied to the H1 tag within the header, I can adjust my styling by adding the word header in front of the H1 and placing a space. So I'm saying on the header tag and then on the H1 tags within the header tag, apply these styles. So let me go ahead and refresh the page. And you'll notice this moved back, this made it normal again, so the only thing that's applying here is the styling from the body. Alright, our next topic is known as a combinator. So combinators allow you to define relationships between the different elements. One of those combinators we've already seen, and it's this space combinator, and that indicates a descendant. So in this case, something underneath something else. There are several other different types of combinators. We're going to focus on the child combinator, which would mean this is the direct descendant of the original. So in this case, if I come back to our headings here, underneath header, H1 is a direct child. Nav is a direct child. But UL and LI are not direct children underneath this. So we may have a situation where we only want to apply a style to a child, but not to the children of the child. So in our particular case, I don't have a good example of this, but what I'm going to do is I'm still going to place a style command in here that shows how to do this, and we're going to do this under the section. I'll use the child combinator, and then in this case H2 is where I want to apply this with our brackets, and we'll make this color red. So if I refresh this, we will have now placed the H2 elements which are within the section elements. Now let me go ahead and I'm going to change this H1 that I changed earlier back to H2 so that we keep the same look that we're looking for at the end. Alright, so now if I compare what we're working on back to the original, still a little different, which is good. And if I compare it to the finished, we're not quite there yet. Still working on it. Alright, next we're going to be talking about the ID selector. What this allows us to do is to apply a style to a element that has an ID selector applied to it. So in our particular case, we can see one of those IDs. It's under our main tag under the section, and it's called introduction. So we can use this to apply a particular style to. So let's go back to our style sheet. I'll go ahead and I'm going to add in another styling element. So we use the pound element, the pound letter, and then the ID, in this case, introduction, to identify where we want to apply the style, or curly brackets. In this case, I'm going to put a background color of pink on this. So go ahead and I'll refresh this. So now our introductory paragraph has a pink background applied to it. We have one more selector we want to look at, and that's the class selector. So in our particular case under index, we have a class that has been defined, and that is known as the pet section. So while we have some IDs, you'll notice here under the class pet section, there's 3 of them. There's actually IDs associated with them as well, but we'd like to use the class in this particular case. So let's style that a little different. So we indicate that we want to apply this to a class by using a dot in the name of the class, in this case pet section, curly brackets, and we'll just do a different background color here, and we'll make this aqua. Refresh this. Alright, so we're getting there. We're getting closer to the look that we have over here. Alright, I wanted to talk about colors briefly for a moment. Now, at this point, we've been using just standard named colors. But in here, we can actually adjust these colors a bit in different ways. So I'm going to change the background color of these by using some different styling here. There are a couple of different ways. One is through hexadecimal numbering. This allows you some fairly granular levels of coloring. And you do this by using a pound symbol. And then you put a hexadecimal value here. In this case, I'm just going to put all zeros. In this case, there's three sets of 2 digits. So in this case, I'm applying a background color of black, all zeros to these areas. Now here in Visual Studio, if you hover over this, it brings up a selector that allows you to actually choose the appropriate color. So I'm just going to click something back in our kind of our aqua color that we had. So if you see this pound symbol and then 6 digits after this, this indicates you're using a hexadecimal color scheme. Now, I'm not expecting you to understand all there is about hexadecimal, but this is just to let you know this is a number. It's just in a different format. Alright, so let's go ahead and I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to get back to, we're going to try what's known as the RGB coloring scheme. This stands for red, green, blue. And it's different levels of red, green, and blue mixed together. So you use the term RGB, put a bracket, I'm going to do 0, 0, 0. It's a different way of looking at this. We refresh this, you notice it's still black. Same thing here is I can hover over this, and I can choose the color that I want from this list. Now it's a similar way to the hexadecimal color scheme, but just a different way of approaching it. So you may see one of these different types of color schemes when you're looking at pages in the future. Alright, so let me go ahead and I'm just going to put this back to aqua. Just a little easier to work with. Alright, so let me refresh that and we're back to our normals. Alright, so let's go ahead and we're going to work a little bit with some text. So I'm going to add some indentation to our text. Let's go ahead and add in a new element here. We're going to apply this to our P tags. So our P tags only, so I need a bracket here. And I'm going to do a text indent, so text dash indent. Now you'll notice here in Visual Studio that it brings up many different options for you. So these are things that you can work with, and you'll just have to play with them and determine how you want to make things look. So in this case, I'm going to make this 20. Then I have to add what's called a PX. This stands for pixels. So there are many different numeric values that you use within CSS. There's not time for me to go over all of them. In this case, I'm going to tell it 20 pixels. A pixel is just a single dot on the screen. So let's go ahead and apply that, and now let's see what that changes. So you'll notice that certain certain pieces of our text now moved over, so it indented slightly. And that's what we want. Let's go ahead and let's just add one more item here. So let's just do a text dash, I'm in a line height. So we'll just change how high the lines are. We'll make this 1.5. So instead of a single line, there'll be a line and a half. Let's go ahead and increase this. So you notice our page increased in length just a little. That's what we wanted. Now let's continue working with text here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to make the font size change. And we're only going to do this for our H2 tags within our section. So that is right here. So let's add a new command. Let's do font size. And we have some options here. Let me just go back here and look at how Visual Studio brings this up. So I'm just going to choose the larger option here. Semicolon. Put my space to make it look better. And let's just adjust this. Okay, so it made it a little difference. Actually made them a little smaller than they were, but that's fine. That looks a little better to me. Alright, let's do our last thing with working with text. We're actually going to change the font. So the look of the text itself. So let's go back up to the body. It looks like actually I've already put it in here. Okay, so this is something we had originally put in. So the font family is Arial. I'm just going to take that out, so we can see the difference in the pages. All right, so let's put it back, and then put it back. Alright, we're moving close to the end now, but before we complete this, let's look at the lists themselves. So within our page, we have several list items. So let's go ahead and let's adjust how those look. So one of the things with a list item, in this case, at the top here, we've got a navigation area that has the dots in front of it, and we also have other areas that have dots in front of them. So let's go ahead and let's apply a change to our list items underneath each of our pets. If we look at these, you'll notice that each of the list items have a class called benefits. So what we can do is we can apply a style to that class. So we'll do that here. So we'll say to the benefits class. And then we're going to do our bracket. And we're going to say we want to change the list style type. We're actually going to take that dot away, so we're going to say that to none. Let's go ahead and refresh this. So you'll notice that takes the dot away in front of these. So that's kind of a nice feature. I don't particularly always like that dot. I just think this makes it look a little cleaner. We can also change that dot by adding a different styling here. So this is a little more complicated, so bear with me as we work through this. So we're going to do this to the benefits class, and then we're going to say its descendant, the list item, and then we're going to do another sub command here calling before. We're saying what happens to the thing before the list item. In this case, it would be a dot, curly brackets. We're going to put here a content, and we're going to say we want this content to be a pound symbol. So now if I refresh this, you'll notice that we have a pound symbol now in front of this instead of the period that we had before. So this just makes things maybe look a little more professional, or more just fit what you're looking for. Okay, so the last CSS item we're going to learn in this particular lesson is known as a pseudo class. Now, these pseudo classes allow you to place styles based upon the state or position or some other characteristics of the HTML structure. What we're going to do is we're going to do what's called a rollover. This means as we move our mouse over something, it'll change it. In this case, we're going to adjust what happens when I move the mouse over our navigation section here at the top. So the last CSS I'll apply here is to our A tags, and I have to put a colon, and then I have to put what it is I want to adjust. In this case is the hover. That is the pseudo class. Put my curly brackets, and what I wanted to say is when I hover over this, I want to change the color. So we'll go from, let's make that stand out a little bit, we'll make that color red. Alright, so now if I hover over these, let's go ahead and see if this works for me. What did I do wrong? Oops. I apologize about that. It looks like my mistake was that I had forgot to refresh the web page. Let's see, I got an error over here I should fix. So now if I hover over these, I should have the colors as I expect. Okay, so this should look pretty darn close to my finished page. And same thing here, if I hover on my finished page, I should get the same thing as on my working page. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to kind of discuss here is, while this does look a little better, this is certainly a far cry from what we started with. We've actually got quite a bit of adjustment to our pages. Now, this definitely is not a professional page. I am not a professional web page designer, nor do I have an artistic flair to make things look nice. But if you do, you can actually do a lot more with your CSS. I'm going to show you a little more advanced look of this. So in this case, I'm going to go over to our finished page here. And I've got a different style sheet that I'm going to apply to the finished product here. This is under index here, so we're referencing the styles, but I'm going to do the better styles. So I'm going to tell this to reference that style sheet instead, and let's go ahead and let's refresh this page. So you'll notice this really makes a difference to the way the page looks. There's some subtle differences here. We've actually changed the look of what the beginning of the list items look like. The colored palette's a little more refreshing. And if I look at that style sheet, you'll notice there's quite a bit more that's been added to this. I'm not going to go through all of this in this particular example, but I will have this on the web page for you so that you can review. Okay, that's it for today's lesson.